And I want to know how many of you out there are veterans of the military. Let's hear it from you. Okay, how many of you out there are veterans or veterans of the police officers or firefighters? Yeah, let's hear it from you. Okay, oath keeper, you guys all took an oath to the Constitution to protect and defend. When did that oath expire? Never. Very good. Good answer. So, Oath Keepers is an organization of both veterans and active duty, both military and police, and we're reaching out to the current servers to make sure they understand the Constitution so they don't accidentally or unintentionally enforce an unconstitutional order. And that letter I read earlier from that policeman is the guy we're looking for. It doesn't take a whole it doesn't take a whole squad of soldiers or a whole division of police officers. It just takes a few in there to make sure that his guys understand the Constitution. And so that's what we're looking for. We're fortunate today to have our founder of Oath Keepers, Stewart Rhodes, here today. He's from Montana, and he put together Oath Keepers back in 2009 after working on a failed political run by Ron Paul in 2008. He realized that working from the top down isn't where it's at. It's working from the ground up, and that's why you guys are here today. We really appreciate it. And so he put together the Oath Keepers to make sure that we understood the Constitution and fought for our rights. And so now it's my privilege to introduce to you Stewart Rhodes.
This is an open carry rally. How many folks here have a rifle slung on their back? Let me see your hands. The rest of you, where are your rifles at? What's your handgun for? To fight your way to your rifle, right? Okay, so next time, bring your dang rifles. Obama says, honest gun owners, responsible gun owners have nothing to fear. Those from us, those who have guns for sporting purposes, for hunting, or for self-defense, have nothing to fear. We just want to get the weapons of war off the street. Well, this is my tool of self-defense. This is my preferred tool of self-defense, is my rifle. But, as someone else said earlier, what is the real point of the Second Amendment? Is it about hunting? No. Is it even about self-defense against some street criminal? No. What's it about? It's about the military capacity of the American people. First of all, so that you don't need a massive standing army. Who's responsible for Homeland Security? That's right, it's not DHS, it's you. Article 1, Section 8 talks about calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and to repel invasions. You are the domestic security force of Homeland Security in the United States. It's the militia of the people. It's not a standing army. And through our own apathy and neglect, we've come to the point now where we do have a massive standing army. Now, I served as an Army paratrooper. Everyone in my family has served in the Marine Corps or the Army. My father, my grandfather, my great uncles, all the way back. But that does not change the fact that you're supposed to be the security force. You, we the people. It's time to take that back. You need to be carrying your semi-automatic rifles, making it very clear that, yeah, it's a weapon of war. That's exactly what it's for. And it's supposed to be in your hands. I'm going to read you a pledge that Oath Keepers just issued about this. The Oath Keepers Milan Labay Pledge. We will never disarm. We will never surrender our military pattern, semi-automatic rifles, and the full capacity magazines, parts, and ammunition that go with them. The fundamental purpose of the Second Amendment is to preserve the military power of we the people so we will have effective means to resist tyranny. Regardless of what unholy, unconstitutional filth issues from the mouths of oath breakers in Mordor on the Potomac, our answer is Milan Labay. What's your answer? Patrick Henry said, guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect everyone who approaches that jewel. Unfortunately, nothing will preserve it but downright force. Whenever you give up that force, you are inevitably ruined. Now, we will not allow our children to be disarmed. We will pass on those military-patterned rifles, magazines, and ammunition to our children and to our children's children. Why? Because as Trench Cox, founding father Trench Cox said in 1788, Congress has no power to disarm the militia. Their swords and every other terrible implement of the soldier are the birthright of an American. The unlimited power of the sword is not in the hands of either the federal or states governments, but, where I trust in God, it will ever remain in the hands of the people. The rifle I slung on my shoulder today, and those you have in your possession right now, are your children's birthright. And we will die in battle before we give up our arms and leave our children in slavery. No one gets out of here alive. What matters is whether our children and our grandchildren are free. That's all that matters. Don't forget that. We will not register ourselves or our arms. Registration is a prerequisite to confiscation, which is the prerequisite to dictatorship and extermination. We will not be photographed, fingerprinted, tracked, and subjected to psych evaluations like convicted sex offenders just for owning semi-automatic rifles. Doing so is itself an act of surrender and submission, taking the mark of the slave. It is akin to taking the mark of the beast. Now get it through your heads right now. Your line is not, you will not surrender your weapons. Your line needs to be that you will not register yourself like a sex offender. When you do that, when you walk into your local sheriff's office or police chief's office and go in there and get fingerprinted and ask for permission to keep your guns, what you have just done is you've handed in your balls. You just surrender, and ladies, ovaries too. You do not register yourself. That's the line. When you do that, you have given up already. You are then a slave in splendor, a slave with a gun temporarily loaned to you by the government that now owns it. Do not do it. That's your line. We will not, and for those of us who are current serving still, police, military, we will not obey any order to disarm the American people or compel registration. Now, that's something we said back in 2009. If you read our Declaration of 10 Orders on our website, it says right there, number one, we will not obey any order to disarm the American people, and in particular, we oppose any renewal of an assault weapons ban, so-called, or a registration, because we knew back then what was coming. We knew this day was going to come. They want your guns because they're afraid of you. And they're afraid of you because they have plans for you that they know you will not like. So you give up your guns and you become a slave. Slaves do not bear arms. Only free men bear arms. Let's not forget, the attempt to disarm the American people back in April 19, 1775 was the final spark. They had put up with a long train of abuses like we have now. The same thing's going on now, a long pattern of abuses. But it was the last straw, was the attempt to come and disarm them. But I want to remind you of something. On April 19, 1775, there was no Second Amendment. They weren't rising up in defense of their constitutional right to bear arms. They rose up in defense of their natural right of self-defense and self-preservation. It's a natural right. I don't care what the Supreme Court says. The Supreme Court can say whatever it wants. It doesn't change the fact that you were born endowed by your Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among them are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and the right to bear arms. Now, there's a story I like from that day. How many here know the story of Samuel Whitmore? You know who he was? Raise your hands if you know who Samuel Whitmore was. Samuel Whitmore was an 80-year-old farmer on that day, April 19, 1775. He was a veteran of the French-Indian War. And he was out tilling his field when he saw the troops go marching by. And he heard the gunfire. And then he saw the next column coming to reinforce them. And that's where he said, that's enough of this. He went back in his house. He grabbed 2 French pistols that he had captured, a captured French sword, and then his musket. He strapped them on, and he went out to war one last time. He ambushed that column, that reinforcement column, at close range. He knew he couldn't run and gun with all the young guys out there, so he said, I'm going to make it count. He got real close, killed three shots, 3 redcoats dropped in the dirt. They charged him with bayonets. He drew his sword, and he fought sword against bayonets. He was shot in the face and then bayoneted 19 times and left for dead. Now his family came out to get his body, and they were crying and they were mourning his death. And then they realized when they got close to him, he was still alive. And not only was he still alive, he was trying to reload his musket for one more shot at the column in the distance. Now he happened to live, but that's not the point. He was asked later, many years later, 10 years later, he's still alive, why did you fight that day? He said, because I did not want my children to be subject to a distant king. That's what he said. He had his priorities straight. He knew that what matters is not his own life. He was already on bonus time. He was a short timer, as they call it in the military. He's ready to check out. He knew what matters whether his children are free. And I want you to understand something else. He knew he was responsible. He was on the hook, even at the age of 80 years old. I don't care how old you are. As John said earlier, when does your oath expire? Expires when you do. I don't care how old you are. I see in this crowd plenty of guys that are tip of the other side of 60, 50, 60, 70. You know what you are? You are dangerous old men, is what you are. Are you afraid of death? No. You're like Samuel Whitmore. You're the modern Samuel Whitmores. Go learn that story. Where are we right now? We are in a direct parallel to where they were in the years leading up to April 1970-75. We're about 1774. And the American people have a choice right now to choose which one it's going to be. Is it going to be 1774 America, or 1775 America, or is it going to be 1935 Germany and submission into a dictatorship? Which one do you choose? If I have no choice, I will choose 1775. In fact, I already have. And I got news for you. Thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps millions of veterans across this country have already made that choice too. The powers that be in D.C. just don't get it. They think that you will submit. I went to Yale Law School. I walked among them for 3 years, as long as I can tolerate it. They really believe that so long as they grab political power by hook or by crook or whatever, so long as they get in that power position, that after that, they can do whatever they want. They honestly believe they can pass whatever law they want, whatever decree they want, by executive order, by UN treaty, and you'll just submit. That's what they believe. The only thing that has stayed the hands of millions of Americans is their own Christian decency and morals. But that does not mean that you will not fight. Every enemy we've ever faced has underestimated the American people. British officers prior to April 19, 1775 swore that the Americans would never dare to fire on the King's troops. One officer bragged he could take one regiment of grenadiers and go up and down the coast, castrating all the males, half of them by force and half of them by coaxing. He was so convinced they would just submit. But they got their butts handed to them that day, and all the way back to Boston, and a swarm of outraged farmers who reacted finally when they came for their arms. After that, another officer said, who was there that day, said anybody who would mistake them for some unorganized mob is much mistaken. There are men among them who know very well what they are about. And what he was talking about was all the veterans out there. Well, in this crowd right here, and throughout this country, all across this land, are men among us who know very well what they are about. These are men who have seen combat. Vietnam, in the sands of Iraq and Afghanistan, they've been there, they've done that. To think that they're going to roll over and submit like slaves out of fear is ridiculous. Tojo thought the same thing. Hitler thought the same thing. They all think Americans are too soft to fight. And then what happens to them? 18-year-old kids kick their asses. That's what happens to them. My stepdad, my wife's dad, he joined the Marine Corps at age 16. He lied about his age to get in. I didn't know about this till his funeral, unfortunately. His enlistment date was December the 10th, 1941. That's when he signed up. He fought all the way across the Pacific, including at Iwo Jima. That is what Americans do when their country is threatened. And anybody who thinks that the current batch of American youth are not up to the challenge just doesn't understand anything. You go here in rural Idaho or rural Montana, I see young boys all the time that grew up hunting. They know how to shoot. They know how to move through the woods. They're brave. A lot of them have gone and fought in Iraq and Afghanistan and come home. Do you really think they're going to submit? No. They are the largest and most well-trained potential insurgent army in the history of the world, is what they are. And their grandfathers and fathers are with them also, all the hunters out there. The domestic enemies of the Constitution had the same kind of arrogance that Hitler did, and Tojo did, and Mussolini, and King George, and all his men. Same kind of arrogance. They think you will just submit. You need to understand that their hubris, their arrogance, knows no bounds. They're not, amen to that. Point is, though, the point is, guys, is there's going to be a fight. You need to set aside right now any notion that we're going to get out of this without one. The only question is what shape it's going to take. And the other big wild card out there they're not thinking clearly enough about is the U.S. military and your sheriffs and your police officers. We have already seen sheriffs standing up across this country. But I want to tell you, they are the tip of the iceberg. They are only the visible tip. And the same goes for all the active duty military and police that are within Oath Keepers. They are the visible tip of a massive iceberg, and the rest of them are unseen under the surface, which I think is great. I don't want them to know the names of every active duty military service member who feels the same way we do. I don't want them to know the names of every cop out there who agrees with us, because it would be too easy to purge them out. I want them to worry about where they are, who they are, and how many there are. I want them to have what I would call strategic doubt in their heads. Let them lay awake at night wondering whether or not their orders will be followed. So it is the mission of my organization, Oath Keepers, to maximize the number of current serving who do understand their heritage, who do know who Samuel Whitmore was, who do know about American history, and know the Constitution, and know where the lines in the sand are. We all went to public school. We didn't learn our Constitution and our history. Some teachers are good to go on that, but as you know, most are not. So we have to teach them what's right. They have honor and courage. The only question is that they know what's right and wrong. When they know what's right and wrong, do you think they'll do what's right? Of course they will. They've got courage. You got Medal of Honor winners and silver stars and bronze stars coming out their rear ends from Iraq and Afghanistan. They've got courage. Make sure they know what's right. Help us spread the word among them about their oath. The founders left us with the most powerful tool we have next to our rifles is that oath. Without the military, the domestic enemies of the Constitution cannot crush us. It cannot be done. I want you to think about 1989 East Germany. That's the goal. Back then, there were massive protests demanding the wall come down. The East Germans were sick and tired of being under communism. They knew how corrupt it was, how false it was, and how evil it was. They wanted out from under it. Massive protests demanded that the wall come down and Germany be reunited. The Communist Party didn't know how to handle these people. So at the end, they finally freaked out and ordered the military, the East German army, to go crush the protesters. Did they do it? No, they did not. The East German military said, we're going to stay on base. They stood down and stayed on base. Without their support, the Communist Party was done. Without their support of the military, the Stasi secret police that everyone was always so afraid of were powerless. They were running around, hiding, tearing off their insignia that they were so proud of, and trying to hide among the normal cops and normal soldiers, denying that they had been in the Stasi. Because without the support of the military, they could do nothing against the people who had risen up. The same is true here. Without the support of the military, I don't care what Obama wants to do, what Feinstein wants to do, or the treasonous Republicans out there who are with them want to do. It doesn't make a difference. They can't do it without the military support. Remember that. Now, just 2 years ago, we saw in Tunisia, same thing happened there. The dictator of Tunisia ordered the troops of Tunisia to crush the protesters who were demanding freedom, who were rising up against him. They told him to go pound sand. Without their support, he had to flee the country. So now, if the East German military, raised under communism, can do the right thing, and if the Tunisian military of a third world dictatorship can do the right thing, do you think the American troops can do the right thing? Yeah. Yes, they can. So set aside this nonsense that all the troops are your enemies, that you'll be facing all the U.S. military. Your enemies want you to think that. They want you to believe that you can do nothing, that you'll be defenseless against Predator drones and F-16s and A-10s and all that. They're forgetting where those guys come from. Where do the Marines come from? Here. Where do the goddamn Army Airborne come from? Here. Infantry comes from here. The closer to the tip of the spear they are, Special Forces, SEALs, Army Airborne, Marines, they didn't join the military for a job. They joined it for civic obligation and duty. They joined it because their dad was a Marine, their grandpa, etc. That's why they did it, like I did. They come from us. You stand up now. All you veterans have an obligation and duty to stand tall. You need to stand up and back your sheriff up to do the right thing. You should all be signing a petition that says, we will not disarm, we will not register ourselves, we will fight if we must. And then go to your sheriff and say, Sheriff, here's all of us with our John Hancock standing up. We will back you up in doing the right thing. If you do the wrong thing, we will oppose you. And then put him on the spot and have him choose which side he's on. This is the time for choosing. The message for all the police and sheriffs out there is choose ye now whom you shall serve. And if you do the right thing, the people will back you up and the veterans will back you up. You do the wrong thing, then God help your soul.
Amen. Amen.
Now, I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution. Who also swore that oath? Raise your hand. You swore it when you entered service. That's the oath you must keep. We're not asking you to take some new oath. We want you to keep the one you already took. That's the whole point. But for those of you who would like to renew your oath, or for those of you who've never taken one and want to take one for the first time, I'm going to offer you that opportunity now. Now, why do we do oath renewal ceremonies? Well, because the Founding Fathers did that. You might not realize it, but back in 1798, there were oath renewal ceremonies. There were oath renewal ceremonies all across America. And one of them was conducted on Lexington Green in 1798, years and years after 1775. And the men who gathered there were members of the militia of Massachusetts. Some of them who had fought on the Green back in 1775 were there. Some of them were also their sons who were there. And they gathered there to renew their oaths because they wanted to make it very clear to the American people that even in a time of political discord and disagreement, back then it was the battle between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, or the Jeffersonians and the Federalist Party. They wanted to make it very clear to the American people that their loyalty was first and foremost to the Constitution. And so they renewed their oaths on Lexington Green. And that's what we did April 19th in 2009. We traveled to Lexington. An amazing experience. To stand there, we lined up right where Captain Parker and his men stood, on ground that had been watered with the blood of patriots, and we renewed our oaths. It was a phenomenal experience. But that's what we do. We're following in their footsteps. And when you look at our back of our shirts, let me see your back of your shirt. Turn around, you're my model. Oh, it's not the right one. Wrong one. Okay. The other shirt, it has a message from John Adams on it. Okay. And it says, because the men who renewed their oaths on Lexington Green sent a proclamation to President John Adams in 1798, letting him know what they had done. And he sent back to them a response, an official response from the president. And he said, "Oaths in this nation are yet considered sacred obligations to God. And that which you have sworn on that hallowed ground," meaning Lexington, "is ample testimony to your devotion to your country and its government," is what he said. And I want you to imagine if we sent a proclamation to Barack Obama about renewing our oaths here today, what do you think he'd say in response? Do you think he'd echo the words of John Adams and congratulate us on our devotion to our country? So let's send a message to Barack Obama right now. The men who have died in Arlington Cemetery and across the world kept that oath with their blood. Do not cheapen it. Do not take it unless you're serious. Raise your right hand. I, state your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. And that I take this obligation freely. Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. Pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God.
Thank you, Stewart Rhodes.